please welcome to the stage Allan Sudlow from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, who will lead a conversation between two different perspectives on AI, one using it to solve problems and the other to expand our imaginations. Allan himself has a background in neuroscience and strategic research, working at the Medical Research Council and the British Library before his current role at AHRC. Allan joined the library in 2008 to lead strategy for engagement, policy and collaborative research across the biomedical and environmental sciences. And you have a distinguished career before joining the British Library as well. So, Allan, over to you to introduce your conversation.
Thank you. And what a brilliant place to come and talk about creativity and sustainability. So thank you for hosting. And it was great to see Nicole chair in the previous session. We only ever meet at Design Council events, I think. So we're part of the same organisation. As you just heard, I'm a director at the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which is part of UK Research and Innovation, which Nicole is also part of as well. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm going to say a little bit about our speakers in a second. And I just wanted to really just emphasise that across the whole of UKRI, we really do believe that human-centred design and design research specifically is important for a better and greener future. And I think this is a great place to hear such inspiring stories and real practical advances in that respect. Also, just one more point before I introduce. I noted yesterday that in the news, Matt Britton, President of Google for Europe, Middle East and Africa, was speaking at the UK AI Safety Summit on the relative risks and rewards of AI in research areas such as robotics, healthcare and climate change. And I'd be interested in reflections on those risks and rewards as we explore some of the uses of AI in both creative practice as well as solutions and services that further our understanding of climate change and also our ability to mitigate those changes. So, enough of me. So, on my right, I have Rob Maslin, who is Design Lead for Regenerative Services and Systems at Satellite Catapult. He leads on design-driven tools and processes that aim to support ethical and planet-positive programs using satellite technologies. You can correct me if I get any of this wrong, Rob, when you start to tell us a little bit about what you do. Rob shared a really interesting piece of work, and I'm hoping he's going to talk about that, where he's been using satellite technologies to monitor and verify forest deforestation in coffee supply chains. And on my left, we have Lex, who leads a team of designers and coders at Comuzi. Have I pronounced that correctly?
You got it right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. A London-based design studio creating future-positive services and experience for governments, organisations and charity. You have got an amazing CV, Lex. So you've been in the academic domain in terms of computational futures and AI, but you've also worked across a range of creative projects. My personal favourite has got to be the hip-hop poetry bot, being a massive fan of, from the Sugar Hill Gang onwards, really, believe it or not, in terms of Rapper's Delight. But don't test me on my knowledge. Okay, so what I wanted to really start to open up with a really simple question around what is the role of AI in your research and how do you see it in terms of that sort of practical reality of where we're at. And we see some of that today with the speech to text, which I just checked to see whether how accurate that is and whether there's any human intervention in that. And so we talk about this thing called AI, which is actually really a group of technologies, and they're all fallible. But I wanted to really understand how you're using it in your own practice at the moment. So starting with you, Rob, what's your relationship with AI technology and how are you using it?
Okay, thank you, Alan. So my organisation, Satellite Applications Catapult, you can imagine the kind of stuff that we do. We work with satellites predominantly. And there's lots of different applications of satellites. We use AI in all of the different areas that we work in. The different technologies that we might use are things like Earth observation. So your Google images that you kind of use to navigate your way around town, and understand the different landscapes that you can see from through Google. But there's lots of other applications and lots of other kind of satellites up in Earth, in orbit, sorry, that provide a range of different intelligence to us on Earth to try to help us navigate and make decisions about our land management, our greenhouse gases, where various leaks are. Within the spectrum of things that you can capture with satellites, we can see in the map the things that we can see within our own visual spectrum, but satellites capture so much more in that spectrum as well, not just UV and infrared or near infrared, but radar, microwaves, gamma rays, a whole range of different sensors within that spectrum, as well as satellite communications is another aspect of satellites. We're also looking at positioning, navigation, and timing. And then there's things like when you send stuff up into space, you need to service it. You need to make sure that it gets up there safely in the first place. You need to decommission it. And AI plays into all of those different areas, and then you have use cases within those areas as well. You've mentioned deforestation, but there's also looking at water quality, there's looking at greenhouse gas emissions and leaks from various pipelines. There's a whole raft of things that we use it for to try to benefit planet and people, basically society. Yeah.
So, and I'll come back to some of those themes about that end-to-end use of the technology and where that fits in that, into that that planet-positive approach to things. Lex, you use AI in very creative ways, and do you give us some examples of the ways that you're exploring its potential?
I guess for me, my first exposure to the world of I tend to use the term machine learning a lot more than I use AI, but my first exposure was, I was studying my master's and I was writing a thesis on bias in AI systems and looking at the impact of data sets and how we integrate these sort of AI systems in some of the environments of like policing, for example. There was a lot of use cases of AI being used in those type of contexts where the data was always wrong and it basically made our bad human decisions faster. So I was really interested in trying to expose those type of things. And a challenge was, I guess at the time, was when I was having these conversations, this is like really 2018, this is before the hype of generative AI as we have it now. So the nuance and the understanding of these things were still very fairly new. So I would be grouped into like diversity and inclusion conversations about stuff, which I have no issue about, but it wasn't allowing me to express what I wanted to talk about. So I kind of positioned and moved away to focus on, creative applications of AI in terms of use cases. Could we build sophisticated AI tools that help creators literally be more creative? And so some of those things were expressed through some of the work I had done with Google, some of the work that, as Allan mentioned, I ran a university module for 2 years at the University of Arts London's Creative Computing Institute, which was called Computational Futures and Artificial Intelligence. And that was me exposing a bunch of art and design students who would come onto a 1-year program. It was a diploma program, like just before they're about to get to their final year of their arts degree or so. They would do a 1-year sandwich year in creative computing, and in that particular module, I would expose them to machine learning models, get them to play around with stuff, but also being able to question AI's role in society and things like that. And so bringing it to this aspect of designing for the planet, I guess, one of the projects I've worked on in the past was working with the University of Edinburgh and the Alan Turing Institute on a project called the Neural Platform. And so this particular project I was working on was looking at how do you visualize climate futures with generative AI models. AI, as much as it's great, where AI really struggles with, right, is uncertainty. So if you were to give it these uncertain scenarios and stuff, what necessarily could machine learning do to basically visualize those particular futures? And so the whole idea was this project was around the Thames Path. London, I'm from London, South London. London is built predominantly on the floodplain. there is NASA data that says that in 2040 most of London will be under flooding. However, when we talk a lot about climate change sometimes, and we talk about, visual images that we refer to climate change, we normally focus it on things that are not close to us or far away from us. And so this whole particular project was like, could we visualize what London would look like possibly under flooding in that case? So, a lot of my day is really about trying to break the machine, I guess, of AI, try to present it to people, or lots of folks can understand it more. And yeah, just play and figure out things as we navigate space. Yeah.
And sort of picking up on that theme of uncertainty or how we interpret things and biases, I guess for both of you, that's a really important factor for understanding the limits of how you're working with AI and how that plays into the services and the products how do you build that into your design process or your research process, Rob, in terms of taking those sorts of things into account?
Absolutely. So I think that I really like what Lex is saying about AI being used to help people imagine futures. And for me, that's all about giving people choice about what future they want to move towards. And I think that the challenge with AI often is we kind of take for granted that it's given us truth. But it's based on data, and that data is often based on human constructs or social constructs. It's based on data that's been collected by human interpretation. It's based on data that's been collected by machines made by humans. And so it has all of those kind of human traits and faults embedded into it. And we don't often think about that enough, I don't think, and really understand the kind of grain of how we can shape the outcomes for a positive planet, but not thinking about the details of what could go wrong. And that can kind of too often just lead to oversights of the real implications of the uses of AI. And that's a real challenge when you think that AI is probably one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal to really scale the impacts of what we're doing. Now, you can scale those impacts for better or worse. You can, hopefully we're going to use it for the better, but we have to be really careful in making sure that the way that we execute it and we use it as a tool, that it is used for the better, because it is a tool. Yeah. And so I give you the example of the work on deforestation that we've done. So we're looking at Sentinel data, which has 10-meter resolution. So it's not fine grain enough to have or to be able to see a tree, for example. But you can see spectral signatures that understand the chlorophyll content, and so you can see sort of land use changes in that area. And the algorithms that we've been working with, say, University of Leicester on, have achieved sort of 80 to 90% accuracy. But that is accuracy. That is, when we've gone on ground truthed or looked at higher resolution data, we found that yes, in 90% of cases, there are instances of deforestation, but in 10% of cases, there aren't. So that data needs to go, it needs to be ground truthed, it needs to be properly understood and not just taken for granted. We need humans involved in the services that we design to go and regulate the way in which we are using and managing forests to ensure that they are taken out of, or that deforestation is taken out of the supply chains of commodities, of food and things that we buy in supermarkets. Because otherwise, if we don't really manage this carefully, the consequences for the people in some of the poorest people in society, the people who are providing this with agricultural goods, they can easily be left behind or penalised for bad decisions that we're making. And
really, as you say, global consequences. And Lex, just, you said earlier around AI can often be used to just make bad mistakes quicker. And your sort of mission, as it were, tell me if I'm wrong, is to try and break that paradigm a bit. And so when you're thinking about the way that we should operate in a sort of inclusive space in the way that Rob's described around, it's sort of not baked in from the start. What sorts of what are you trying to do through your projects to sort of disrupt that using the same ground truth data sets or any of that sort of application of the underlying, what's under the hood, as it were?
I think it's perspective, right? I think there's a good point that Hannah made, talking about, a lot of times we work in industries which are very homogenous, and there's nothing wrong with that, or maybe there is, who knows, it's up to debate. But what happens a lot of times is we don't maybe question the consequences of stuff we're doing, right? We don't question maybe the particular data sets that we work with. A lot of times when I first started in this space and would talk about bias in AI systems and talk about, what a lot of people would ask me is, how do you make things unbiased? And I was like, that doesn't reflect the human condition. The whole purpose of machine learning is to basically is to create computers or machines that can do what humans do, or be better at. That is the sort of definition of machine learning from the 1956 summer Dartmouth proposal that was written by a bunch of mathematicians and scientists who wanted to get funding to look at how can we make computers achieve stuff. And they had like 7 sort of areas they wanted to tackle, and one of those areas was about creativity. And it was this all randomness and creativity. And one of the hardest things sometimes, like for a long period of time, I would train my own models, but I am picking the data to do that, right? Or with the Thames Path 2040 project, where I'm trying to create this interface that folks could interact with, that could see what happens when parts of London in 2040, what that might look like. And I need pictures of Peckham. I grew up in Peckham, that's where I grew up. And one of the hardest things was going on the internet and trying to find pictures of Peckham. It was hard, and the reason why was because Peckham as an area has sort of, its reputation has changed over the years. So it was predominantly known I had this bad reputation for crime. And then obviously now it's like, the hipsters' #1 universe place to be in, and the rents are high and all of that stuff. And so one of the hardest things was I used to try to train an AI model on pictures of Beckham, but I don't necessarily I can't source that from the internet. And most times when we train these models, we source it straight from the internet and from all these different places, and we put it in. However, I have to go the extra mile, which is I now need to curate images of Peckham and do that. But what happens, right? That could be my own vision of Peckham. So I need to be able to have this broader perspective of everyone's visions of Peckham in order to include that into an image. Because for me, I'm going to come from my perspective and think, and I'm using such a very novel example just to explain how simple it is sometimes in that process to just and I think for me, it's about having this collective viewpoint on how we see objects, how we see the world, how we see those stuff, and train that to a model. I think also questioning what role should AI play in this aspect here of solving problems with imagining futures. I think we've got to give it boundaries and not think it's boundaryless, because that's when we get into those particular problems. I think it's good for very narrow use cases, but I think when you give it this uncertain environment, that's when you have those particular problems. We can talk about ChatGPT and all these other tools, but they still use a lot of human moderators behind the scenes to moderate this stuff. There is investigations that show that there are folks in Kenya who basically get paid $2 a day or an hour or something to basically moderate ChatGPT. So no matter how sophisticated we've gotten with a lot of these tools, there is still a lot of human input under the layer that still needs to be done. So I think it can be broad. We only got half an hour, so I ain't trying to talk for too long yet. I
also feel we've been a bit down on AI since we started, so we maybe take the positive spin on it a little bit and talk in the last 5-ish minutes or so. Rob, where do you see the areas that you work with in your teams? Where do you see uncharted territory that actually AI could be really helpful in, and in what context?
Well, the legislation looking at deforestation in the UK hasn't gone through yet. It has in the EU, but it hasn't in the UK. I don't know about the US. So there's still uncharted territory there. And it is, just to kind of speak to the power of AI, it's unimaginable that we could monitor somewhere the size of Brazil, or even a municipality within Brazil. We've taken one area of Brazil that we looked at called Mato Grosso, a municipality. And if that were a country, it would be the 33rd largest country in the world. Now, to monitor something that size, is inconceivable with just human labour. You need to utilise artificial intelligence from computational algorithms. And partly because the satellite data and the algorithms can access information that we can't on our own. The other thing as well I really want to point out is just that, I design services with AI, but I'm not the expert on AI. I'm lucky enough to work with a whole raft of different experts within my organization who are specialists in satellite data, in algorithms, in setting up the different technologies that we need to use. But then we also need to collaborate with people outside of our organization as well. So even within our organization, we don't have all of the expertise to be able to solve all of these problems. And so there is a real kind of connectedness that needs to happen across sectors, disciplines, different areas of the different skill sets that we have in society, academia, and all of the other things that we need. And I think there's some real blind spots as well that we need to try and tap into. And this is where my kind of approach to thinking that we should really take ownership of the impact that we're trying to create, rather than just relying on the technologies that we have at our disposal and thinking that they can do the job for us. We really need to look at the impact.
But absolutely, that collaborative. Lex, did you want to comment on that collaborative approach to creativity in the space that you work in?
Allan said I was down on AI. I wasn't. I was just trying to do my. I was trying to do my. I think I work in a space, in a tech space, where we're good at hyping emerging technologies. Yeah. And I think for a long time, I've constantly been, when I'm always talking about it, I'm always trying to bring it to earth a little and just be like, these technologies are great and I believe in their potential. I think they provide so much. There is a, if I had a slide, I would show the 5 different slides off my head. I think AI as a co-pilot in being able to assist a creative practitioner in the process is really cool. I think there's some really interesting things that AI and machine learning can necessarily do there. So I'm really bullish about that. I'm really looking forward.
Very creative with it, so it's got huge potential.
But I also know behind the scenes how much work had to be done to tweak the variables to present something to an audience where people are like, yeah, this is amazing. And I'm like, you don't know what's happened. So I think it's such a new space. And I think my most important thing is I just encourage everyone here to try it out, to experiment with it, play with it. And, I think they still, it's such a new space. We're still trying to figure it out. I'm interested to see what happens when the hype cycle sort of dies down and see
Will it ever?
because I think I love what Rob's doing, and that's a different use case to what we see a lot. You know what I mean? And I think there's an opportunity to have those 2 perspectives, which I think is also really valuable to look at those actual true applications of machine learning in practice.
Absolutely valid stuff, just in different ways. Yeah. Are we going to take some questions? Is that what we want to do?
There's nothing online, so if there's any questions on the room.
Oh, yeah. They might kick off against each other.
Go on, try.
Okay. Does this mic work? No. Okay. Oh, yes, it is. Fabulous. I was going to ask, in the spirit of, the collaboration conversations we've been having, how do we bring people along into the AI space? Because I'm sitting here as a 36-year-old who spends a lot of time on social media, utterly terrified of trying ChatGPT because I might break it. How do we where do people get started? How do we bring them in on this? Because it does still feel like quite an ethereal, scary concept to a lot of us, and a lot of us just don't know where to begin.
I guess a lot of the projects, one of the things we did in the past, we ran this workshop at the Tate. How does AI augment human relationships? So we ran it at the Tate as part of this exhibition that we was doing on AI and emerging technology and all this stuff. And the whole idea was basically bring folks who come to visit, to come to the Tate to see something else, and they come to this workshop, and it was like getting it to be relatable to something like relationships or, folks dating in that case, give them this context of machine learning and then try to get them to play around with what role machine learning should play in their life. Because I think sometimes, we have these conversations and a lot of us here have the nuance and the intellectual space or, ability to have these conversations. Then I go to my grandma and she's struggling to use a remote control and she's like, I ain't gonna talk to her about machine learning because she don't even know how to use the remote control. And that's a real, literal thing, right? And it's like, okay, we can have these conversations here, but we also, collaboration is also going outside of a lot of these places and putting it in public space or connecting with those community groups where these technologies will come into play. So that's the way how we've tried to do things in the past, in the pre-ChatGPT world, because I think ChatGPT being introduced helped to change a lot of the narratives and the perspectives of relationships with machine learning and stuff in a way. But it's also still obviously going out of these four walls and being involved more in the community, especially a community where this language, these topics, these debates, these things we're having, they don't maybe use these words. It might be, we're talking about mobility, but it might be just trying to get to work. You know what I mean? And how we can take these things outside of these spaces and, put them in very plain language for people to interact with. And we've done a lot of projects in that case over the years to help improve the understanding of machine learning and its impact in society.
And I think we're at time, but just in case you wanted to respond as well, Rob, obviously you work in a very specific technical environment, but what's your relationship with basically how do you explain what you're doing to your auntie, for example, or how does that comms piece, engagement piece work in your space?
Comms and engagement, okay, well, I don't know. I think, we do a lot of kind of discussions and with different parties, and we try to support government on finding the right solutions to technology. I don't know that the discussions that we're having around AI specifically mature yet. I think AI, the challenge with AI is it's moving such a pace, it's very difficult to actually try and keep up with. I think that there's often sort of a perception that things like legislation are a blocker to the progress of AI. But actually, if people felt safe using AI, and if there was better regulation to support people and make sure that we had a trusted environment, actually you would probably see far more better adoption of that technology. And so I think that the real key here to make sure that AI is a force for good and positively utilised is that we need better and faster, stronger regulation with more kind of uptake of skills like data ethics and more maturity in the skills that we have within technology to put safeguards in place.
And so we obviously didn't have enough time to get into lots of things, but thank you very much, Rob. Thanks, Lex.
Wow, that was really super inspiring to be able to unpack that and make that really simple for people to understand some of the key issues, Rob, Allan, and Lex. Also reflecting on the fact of the training data like garbage in, garbage out, and your Peckham example was excellent to kind of bring that to life. The other aspect, because we're talking about design for planet, is the carbon footprint of large language models themselves. And I know a lot of people have been thinking about how much power and carbon footprint does ChatGPT have. So just was doing a quick search. So if you just have a conversation with ChatGPT, not very long, say 20, 50 lines, that takes half a liter of water in the data center, because I know Rob's into data centers and we talk about data centers. And currently, ChatGPT alone, the ChatGPT 3 uses around 8.4 tons, it emits 8.4 tons of carbon itself, and that's twice the output of an individual in UK. So it's just to give you a sense that when we talk about adoption of new technologies, if you design the car accident, as Raymond Lowy would say. So how do you design a better car accident? We just need to be cognizant of the fact that when we put our playful hat on, we might want to consider how these language models and all these new technologies, what kind of carbon footprint they also have, because we'll end up in a situation where we create a different kind of a problem. But we'll solve that soon.